Alright, so today I was looking at an email and also reading my YouTube comments, and twice today I ended up running into the claim that creationists are moving the goalposts. Now the guy I'm emailing back and forth is a great guy. He's a master's student, or not master's student, I don't know, I think he's going for a PhD. But he's another biotech person. He's studying some kind of molecular genetics. I don't remember exactly what. And then I also have some trolls on my YouTube channel that are, I'm going to admit, I make it no secret of them. I don't really take them very seriously because I don't think that they're serious and honest about their questions. I think they're just on YouTube to waste my time. And I really don't think that they're willing to learn for most of them, because they make a lot of claims that are... They'll debate me on the stuff that's not even controversial. They'll debate me on stuff I say that's mainstream science that everybody accepts, and then they'll keep wanting to debate me over it, even after I explain to them and show them that this is mainstream science. Anyway, so twice today I ran into this claim that creationists are moving the goalposts, and I've heard this before. However, I find this to be a very strange claim, because where on earth are creationists supposed to move them where evolutionists haven't already set them? For those of you who, well, anybody who follows the creation-evolution debate will know that evolutionists, especially over the past few years, they've made these grandiose claims. They've made these claims that all of biology can be explained through purely naturalistic processes. They've even gone so far as to claim that an intelligent designer is not allowed. Now, if you're not allowed to say that life is designed, if you're saying, well, that's not scientific, that's not allowed in science, which is really pseudo-philosophy. It's not, they don't really, the only basis they have for that is to object that it doesn't agree with the materialistic religion. And if it doesn't agree with the materialistic religion, then it's, somehow exempt from science. You're not allowed to even consider that possibility. But evolutionists are the ones who made this claim that all of biology can be explained in purely natural processes. The Darwinian Evolution, as it stands today, which is more neo-Darwinism, but let's just look at current forms of Darwinism in all its different forms, because there's a couple new variations that aren't exactly neo-Darwinism. They're more post-neo-Darwinism, things along those lines. But in a Darwinian worldview, basically what you have is a single-celled organism that, that ended up developing into all of the life that we see today. And somehow you went from chemicals to that single cell. Now, evolutionists will say, well, technically Darwinian evolution doesn't start until after that first cell. Now, they try to use Darwinian processes to explain how the first cell arose, but anyway, let's just give them that. Evolution, in a Darwinian sense, Darwin's theory, the more historical Darwinism, and the modern adaptations of it, they really are dealing with, you have a cell, and it developed into all the life we see today. Now, a creationist can rightly come along and say, okay, let's see how mutation and natural selection can result in a fundamentally new biochemical pathway. That's perfectly reasonable, because after all, Darwinists say that all of the biochemical pathways out there, all of these complex things that the cells do, all of these can be explained through mutation and natural selection. And you can't really say that, oh, well, it'll take millions of years to do this, because with E. coli, because they have a generation time of about 20 minutes, and human beings have a generation time of about 20 years, the equivalent of 1,000,000 years of human evolution would be able to be observed in E. coli in just under 2 years. Or we'll even round up to 2 years, just because, sometimes you might have, maybe they were a little cold that day and they reproduced a little more slowly or something like that. Whatever. We should be able to see these fundamental, substantial changes that evolutionists claim can happen. Yet we don't. We don't see fundamentally new biochemical pathways. We don't see people doing things like taking genes that code for different parts of the bacterial flagellum, completely removing them, and then seeing mutation, natural selection replace these proteins. We don't see that. But according to Darwinian evolution, we should be able to see something like that. Maybe not every single time. Maybe that one time you had maybe 99 times out of 100, you don't quite get that. But every once in a while, you should be getting these fundamentally new biochemical pathways. We should be getting these completely novel cellular structures that aren't just like a little bump on a cell wall or something like that. We need to see something that's really substantial and really fundamentally different in the structure of the cell. And it wasn't creationists that said, well, all of life on Earth can be explained by purely natural processes. It was evolutionists, and they also claimed that they have proven evolution. They've claimed to have proven that all life on Earth can be explained through purely naturalistic processes, which they haven't. What we've proven is we've proven that animals and organisms in general change over time. Creationists have always agreed on that point. If you, most of you have probably sat in a high school biology classroom where they tell you, now creation teaches that species don't change over time. Of course not. That is not what creationists teach. Even before the time of Darwin, people knew about natural selection. It was actually Edward Blyth that first proposed the idea, not Charles Darwin. Anybody who says it was Charles Darwin is kind of mistaken in their history. Now, Darwin probably did a lot to elaborate on it that Blyth didn't have, but it was originally Blyth that came up with the idea. I'm actually finishing up Origin of Species right now, so it was interesting that Darwin never even claimed that creationists denied species change. He readily acknowledged, well, yeah, everybody knows that species change. I mean, it wasn't even a debate in Darwin's time. In fact, one of the sources he cited was the Book of Genesis. Like I've said in other videos, he cited a shepherd who was selectively breeding his sheep. And through selective breeding, he was able to get different traits in his sheep. So even the Book of Genesis acknowledges that species change. It talks about plants developing thorns after sin and the fall and all that good stuff. So you can get, I've mentioned this in other videos, and rather than admitting that, oh yes, the Bible does say that species change, even just a straightforward reading of the Bible, you know, taking it as 6 actual days, and not 6 days of some bizarre time frame, just reading it at face value, it acknowledges that species change. Creation, I don't know of any form of creation. Well, if we're talking about creation versus evolution, everybody's always acknowledged that species change. It's not been a matter of debate. Anybody who says otherwise is, whether they know it or not, they're setting up a straw man argument. But anyway, so basically one of the big things I've seen with this, moving back to moving the goalposts, it's been evolutionists who have claimed right along that all of biology can be explained by purely naturalistic processes. And they've tried to use, for quite a long time, they've been able to use millions of years as their kind of out to say, well, we can't really observe these grand changes because they take so long to happen. That doesn't work anymore, because we know a lot about molecular biology. We've had the genomics revolution. We can grow E. coli like crazy in vats and vats and vats. You can have more E. coli in the laboratory than the number of people that have ever existed on the planet. It's not, and they can also undergo things that are the equivalent, are pretty similar to sexual reproduction. So you can have the sexual processes that supposedly push evolution forward. If Neo-Darwinism is true, and if we were able to go from an ape-like ancestor to human being in the course of just about 5 million years or so, give or take, then we should be able to see substantial changes in bacteria in the laboratory, the type that would support the Darwinian account. Yet we don't. We see changes, but we don't see these types of changes. We see things like the loss of an enzyme resulting in antibiotic resistance, or we might see the duplications of a pre-existing gene. We see all kinds of different things. We don't see these developments of fundamentally new biochemical pathways. We don't see these substantial changes the evolutionists claim can happen. I remember one scientist in an interview saying that, quoting a different scientist, saying that in the past 100 years we haven't seen the emergence of any new species of bacteria. Of course, we have 10,000. I'm sure we have 10,000 different strains of E. coli. I don't know the exact number, but we don't see anything fundamentally different. E. coli is still E. coli, and even if it was even if we were to see species in some type of Escherichia, gosh, I've never tried to pronounce that out loud before. But if we saw something that was basically a sister species to E. coli, would that prove evolution? Would that prove that molecules can turn into people? No, because basically what you have is it would just be a variation of E. coli. Slightly different species, but it would still be E. coli. It would be essentially the same thing. Everybody agrees that dogs came from wolves. Everybody agrees that cats, well, I don't know if everybody, but young Earth creationists argue that all the cats in the world, whether it's lions, tigers, house cats, bobcats, whatever, they're all related. All came from one pair of cats in Noah's Ark. There can be substantial amount of change, but all this is variation on a particular body plan. A cat is still a cat at the end of the day. All you're doing is changing different sizes of ears, maybe some genetics with a mane, different proportions of the body. I mean, there's dwarf elephants in the fossil record. It's not a big deal. All it is variation on a body plan. Evolutionists argue that variation on body plans like this can be extrapolated to have a bacterium, or the equivalent of a bacterium. It would be more of a prokaryote. You might not actually consider it a bacterium, but some kind of single-celled organism that lived billions of years ago was able to develop into human beings. They have no evidence that the process of mutation and natural selection can be extrapolated like that. And it's not that, oh, you can walk 10 steps in that direction, but you can't walk 11 steps. No, the reason is these types of changes that we're seeing they don't go in the right direction. I wasn't planning to talk about this in this video, but we don't see these onwards and upwards changes. We don't see the development of new fundamentally unique biochemical pathways. We don't see these things. We see nylon eating bacteria. Guess what? Nylon was designed based on the protein structure. That's not a big deal. All you had was the bacteria had an enzyme that was designed to break down proteins. Nylon was built based on the chemical structure of proteins. So when you had a defect in this particular enzyme, it wasn't as specific as it had been before. It ended up losing some of its specificity, losing some of the specific shape to its structure. So it's kind of like you broke a lock and now it can accept two different keys rather than just one kind as before. So I'm sorry, I'm talking way too much all at once. Anyway, moving the goalposts. I don't see how you can say that creationists are moving the goalposts. It doesn't make any sense, because evolutionists are the ones that made the grand claim that all of life can be explained without a designer. They've said that a designer is not needed, and they've actually, a lot of them have gone as far as to say that a designer is not allowed because it violates the religious rules of science. It's not allowed to contradict the materialistic religious belief, which is a religious belief. Saying that you're not allowed to contradict materialism in science is no different than saying you're not allowed to contradict Hinduism in science. It's not objective, it's not logical, it's not scientific. There's no reason for it. Before the time of Darwin, nobody had this rule. Maybe there were one or two quacks, but there's always one or two. Isaac Newton didn't view the world this way. People before the time of Darwin really viewed the world as the result of the handiwork of God. The founders of modern science were generally biblical creationists who took God at his word, and they thought that since the universe is logical and rational, we should expect it to have logical, rational order to it. We should expect it to adhere to certain laws that are consistent, rational, and understandable. Especially since God commands us to understand the world in the Bible. So to say that somehow believing in God is going to hinder your science is nonsense. I mean, atheism had been around for quite a while, for quite a long time, but atheism had no reason to think that the universe is going to be logical, rational and understandable. Christians believe that since the world was made by God, made by a mind, made by somebody who knew what he was doing and who wanted people to be able to understand the world would be logical and consistent. Just compare that to the pagans, who didn't really have a logical, consistent view of the world. Paleontology in Greek mythology would have been completely nonsense, because the fossils could be put there by trickster gods trying to fool everybody. You couldn't really do paleontology, whereas the God of the Bible doesn't lie to people. And by the way, no, the fossil record does not support evolution in the Darwinian sense. I'll probably talk about that more in some other videos. But bottom line, evolutionists are the ones that have made these grand claims. And if you have somebody who, if you say, okay, show me an example of an experiment where you were able to get life from non-life. Show me the emergence of a cell from non-living matter. Or even show me time when you've mixed together RNA molecules and ended up with, just RNA nucleotides, and ended up with a self-replicating RNA molecule. Guess what? They don't exist. And then show me how a self-replicating RNA molecule became a living cell. Evolutionists are the ones that have claimed that this can happen. They've made this claim, and they've claimed that this is science. No, this isn't science, because there's nothing to back it up. There's no evidence that life can emerge from non-life. All we have is wild speculation. Yeah, we formed amino acids naturally in the laboratory. Big deal. Amino acids are very simple compared to even having a protein. You're not going on your way to producing life. That's like saying that producing ink in the ocean proves that the Encyclopedia Britannica could have arisen naturally. And no, that's not a straw man argument, because it's not about the material that it's made out of, it's about the specific arrangement. We might see cement form naturally. Cement is to the Pentagon what amino acids are to living things. Yet, cement forming naturally doesn't prove that the Pentagon could have formed naturally. Anyway, yes. If an evolutionist says, oh, well, you're moving the goalposts, you can respond, well, actually, evolutionists are the ones that set the goalposts. They're the ones that put it there. They're the ones that claimed that all of biology can be explained by purely naturalistic processes. They're the ones that made this wild claim. Now, if a creationist comes along and says, back it up with science, that's not unreasonable. That's perfectly reasonable, that's scientific. That's what science is supposed to be. If somebody says this snake oil can cure cancer, you say back it up. If that person says, oh, well, you're moving the goalposts. If they're saying you're moving the goalposts, what that really means is that they're making a grand claim and they have no science to back it up. And evolutionists don't have millions of years to hide behind anymore, because we know so much about bacteria. We have the genomics revolution. We can watch the equivalent of a million years in human time is only about 2 years in the time of E. coli. So we should be seeing these grand extreme claims that evolutionists make but can't back up. They should be able to back it up. And of course, there's a lot that I could say about propaganda in the news media, propaganda in the science magazines, where they'll say a lot of things that aren't science. They might have a title that says, oh, a dolphin was formed with legs, or a dolphin was found with legs on its back. Then you read the article and it turns out they're not legs, they're actually flippers. There's a lot of propaganda out there, people. People will say, oh, well, there's a mutation. It resulted in antibiotic resistance. Oh, wow, that sounds like you gained something fundamentally new and different that was never there before. Antibiotic resistance, you have stronger bacteria. No, but then you end up looking into the details. And you end up finding that all that happened was this bacteria has a malformed enzyme. So this bacteria lost the function of its enzyme. And because it lost the function of the enzyme, the antibiotic can't hurt it anymore. That's not molecules to man evolution. That's just the loss of an enzyme. You can't extrapolate that to say, oh, all of life on Earth could have developed from one single common ancestor that was a single-celled organism. Can't say it, because you can't develop into a human being from a prokaryote, from something like a bacterium, by saying, and by the way, for those of you who are scientifically educated, I'm using bacterium because lay people don't know what archaea are. They probably don't know what prokaryotes are. So it would be something like a bacterium, just to keep things simple so that everybody understands what I'm talking about. You can't take a bacterium or something like a bacterium, be it archaea or some other prokaryote, and gradually develop that into something like a human being or all of the life we see on Earth today by gradually removing enzymes. Just by corrupting enzymes, that's taking steps in the wrong direction. Darwinian evolution is supposed to be able to move forward by baby steps. Antibiotic resistance, there's different ways to get it, but saying that losing an enzyme is one step in evolution, well, that's one step backwards. It's not one step forward in the evolutionary process to develop more and more complex life form, more and more advanced species. Anyway, I've gone on way too long in this video, rambled quite a bit, so, but it's probably good rambling. Check out my other videos. Check out greenslug.com, which I'm adding more about creation versus evolution. I have a creation search engine on there, so you can learn of the argument. You can use the creation search engine and research PhD scientists, people who are well respected in their fields, who are arguing for young Earth, who are arguing for a global flood, who are arguing for design in nature. You can also check out blueslug.com, which is my science search engine. For those of you who are biotech majors or any type of science major, blueslug.com is really for you. It's designed for scientists and for college-level science students, especially people in my field, which is biotech, because, well, it's my field and that's what I'm designing it for. But even if you're geology, physics, even to an extent if you're like a psychology major, blueslug.com is great for you. Anyway, this is plenty of time for this video. This is Greg, out. Stop.